A short explainer video about why the way you walk could be causing your hip, knee or foot pain. So this is particularly trying to get to the bottom of why your feet or knees or hip or something in your lower limbs keeps getting bad or will keep coming back when you think you've got rid of it. So for more information about all of this, you can go to our website, which is bxclinic.co.uk, or you can follow us on Instagram, all of them about BX Clinic. So to start with, we'll go through a little bit about me. So my name's Ian Sadler, I'm a podiatrist and I've been practicing for nearly 20 years now in medicine, both initially in the army and then as a podiatrist and specialising in biomechanics, or what's now called musculoskeletal biomechanics. So we are located as a clinic under the title BX Clinic in Norwich, but we also offer virtual appointments, which can make that a little bit handier. And we are also run a company called BX Co, which does training on orthotics and biomechanics, stuff like that, so that's worth keeping an eye out for as well. So what are we here to do? So we're here to talk about walking, commonly called gait. It is an unconscious activity. You do thousands of steps every day. And you can see we've been doing it for around 950,000 years. And these are the oldest footprints we found in the UK, which were in Haysborough, that's how you spell it, how you say it, in Norfolk. So we're also going to cover how are we able to walk, when does walking hurt you, and what to consider when you're trying to help your walking related pains. So how do we actually walk? So first of all, in order to tackle that question, we've got to think about why we're walking in the first place. So what's the aim that your body is trying to achieve by the act of walking? And essentially it's to carry your head from one place to another. So the imperative when you're walking is keeping your head upright and keeping your eyes level with the sort of surface that you're walking on. The other thing it's trying to do is be efficient. So inefficiency is sort of moving your weight around, so your centre of mass, which we usually keep around your belly button, the umbilical area. So we're trying to keep that bit nice and level. It's got to deal with the shape of the ground, so whether you're walking on an uneven surface, on concrete, up a hill, down a hill, your walking has got to adapt for that, bearing in mind the two previous imperatives. It's also got to absorb the impact forces of you actually hitting the ground, so your body weight accelerating onto the ground and then ground stopping you. And it's also got to propel you, so it's got to get you forward or backwards or sideways depending on what you're trying to achieve with the walking. All of that has to happen in about half a second per step. So when you're out and walking, each foot's only in contact with the ground for about half a second. So in order to achieve the imperatives of walking efficiently and carrying your head around safely, it's only got about half a second per step. We do that around 7,000 times a day, so that's the UK average for the number of steps that the average person is taking. So that's a lot of repetitions every day that your body is having to go through to do a walking step. So what are the components of a walking step? So we've obviously got foot and ankle function. We've also got to touch the ground. So the way we go about that is to touch the ground with the outside border of our heel first of all. Then we have to roll the foot in. So that movement is called pronation. Pronation generally gets a bit of a bad reputation, but all pronation actually is us sort of hitting the ground and rolling that foot inwards. This allows you to accept your weight onto the ground or absorb shock. So the shock absorption is to take your weight onto the ground through the movement of pronation. It also allows your foot to become relatively more flexible. So it lets your foot adapt to the shape of the ground. You then have to move your ankle over the top of the foot. So the foot, once it's rolled onto the ground and is sort of flat against the ground, you then have to move your ankle over the top of it. You then have to roll the foot back out again. This movement's called supination. So it then re-stiffens the foot and gives you something firm to push off. So we see that in half a second, our foot has to roll in, that movement called pronation, accept our body weight onto the ground, adapt to the surface, swing your ankle over the top, roll back out again, re-stiffen and give you something to push off. So it's doing that 7,000 times a day. As we lever through your toes, it helps to get hip extension. All right, so the foot movement isn't working in isolation. It's not just your foot that's doing the rolling in and the rolling out, the pronation, the supination. It's also having an effect on allowing other parts of your legs to move. So the hip, in this case, from the leverage of your toe extension. So components of your walking step. We've got trunk, lower back, and hip function. Your hips have to flex, as we see Mr. Beckham here flexing his hip relative to his trunk, which allows us to extend the leg outwards and externally rotate, getting our foot ready to hit the ground with the outside border of the heel. As you bend your ankle over your foot, so we're now you've got your foot on the ground and it's rolled in, you're starting to bend that ankle over the top. So what's happening above there is the hip is relatively extending. So as we see on his other leg here, is extending out and his ankle is therefore bending over the top. The pelvis part is rotating the top part of your leg, so your thigh bone is being rotated, whereas the foot part is rotating the shin bit of your leg. Your glute muscles fire to resist this and keep your trunk upright and your back straight. Your hip continues to extend and helps to roll your foot back out and do the supination. So the rolling in of your foot is largely driven by the ground and the shape of your foot, whereas the rolling out of your foot is largely driven by the hip extension and you're moving your centre of weight past your foot. So if we then move to knee function, so we've now got another bendy bit stuck in the middle, it acts as a passive stabilising hinge between your foot and your hip function. So really, your knee's quite a simple bit of kit in comparison to all the stuff that's going on at the hip end and all the stuff that's going on at the foot end. So it bends a little bit, so you don't have to lift your centre of mass up. So remember we said we're trying to be efficient with each step, so we don't want to have to lift your weight upwards. So a little bit of a bend here helps keep the centre of mass moving straight across the ground as we start to bend the ankle over the foot that's contacting the ground. Your thigh bone is rolled by your hip, whereas your shin bone is rolled by your foot. So your knee has to maintain synchronization between these two components. So the driver of the rolling in of your leg is the foot, the driver of the rolling out of your leg is your hip. So we get to see these two opposing forces have to be synchronized and maintained at the level of the knee. So we've got to compensate somewhere. Your body will fight hard to keep your head up and your centre of mass relatively still. So we're trying to not move your head up and down too much. We're trying to not move your centre of mass very much. So we're trying to maintain these two bits relatively still in the walking step. You only have so many bits that move. So your hip, your knee, your ankle, and then all the little bones in your foot. If one bit moves less, you'll use another bit to compensate. So let's think about that again. All of this movement that we just discussed, so hip extending, knee bending, ankle flexing, and foot dealing with the shape of the ground through pronation and supination, if one of those is not functioning as well as it could, you then have to compensate somewhere else. And we've only got so many places that bend. So this compensation that we're all doing somewhere, so your body is compensating somewhere for something. So your body may tolerate this for many, many years, or it may not. It may hurt you instantly to do this compensation. So we have to then look at the effect of aging on your joints and on this system. So we've got a system that's designed to do in excess of 7,000 steps a day in half a second, over and over and over again, days on end. And as our body ages, there are effects on how we can tolerate that. So the first effect is stiffness. As we age, the collagen that makes up things like the cartilage in our joints and the actual muscles and tendons that work our joints, they get stiffer. So around your ankles and feet, this means your ankles won't bend as much, and then your feet may be less able to adapt to the shape of the ground. And the level of the knee, you may be less able to tolerate the twists and turns created by your hips and your feet. At the level of the hip, if you will reduce the ability to extend and flex that hip, then you're going to have to compensate somewhere. Again, lower back, we know that this is a common problem for us bipedal walkers, us humans, so it's something that your body may be using to compensate, and therefore if it gets stiff it becomes a bit of a problem as well. The other effect that we have from aging is slower repair, or from your sort of an injury or even your normal activity. So if your body heavily compensates at the knee, it could manage that for decades on end really well. But if you just slightly slow down the repair mechanisms with aging processes, then something that was working brilliantly for you for years may start to hurt as you get a bit older. You also pick up knocks along the way. So it's not necessarily genuinely aging, but the longer you've had a body, the more likely you are to have injured it in some way. So a sprained ankle you had 20 years ago, your body could have compensated really well for that, but your knee then starts to complain about being the place that does the compensation. So we've got to address both of those areas at the same time, for example. So these could be breaks, dislocations, sprains, strains, osteoarthritis, many different causes. So any of these things that starts reducing your capacity at the ankles and feet, at your hips, your knees, your lower back, this is all going to cause you to have to cheat or compensate somewhere, and that place of compensation is often the place that hurts. So your body will find a way. You are still walking, you're still getting around, even though you've had a body for some time and you've probably picked up some injuries on the way, and you may not have been moving as efficiently, perfectly all the time anyway, but your body will find a way. So the reason I've got this pendulum image here is we generally expect a pendulum to be the spindly bit at the top and a weight swinging underneath it. This allows a motion to occur which is fairly consistent. Whereas what a walking body is we have the spindly bit at the bottom of your foot and the weight at the top. So we're spinning that weight over the top of your foot, and then it's got these various different components to help achieve that across. So we're essentially an upside down pendulum for the purpose of biomechanics. We've got to have a mechanism of synchronizing the joints, move and balancing that weight above the spindly bit. So your body is not concerned if this system currently hurts you, all right, or will hurt you in the future. It's just dealing with the momentary step of landing your foot on the ground, spinning your body weight over the top of it, and then preparing itself for the next step, irrespective of the shape of the ground or whether that system is going to hurt you in the future. It's very, very in the moment, if you like. So what can we do to aid those bits? So if we think we've got the foot and the ankle, we've got the knee and we've got the hip, there's only so many bits that move, and what can we do to help those bits move or deal with the compensation that they are having to do if something is starting to fail or become uncomfortable? So the first thing you can do is work on your balance. So if the job we've got to do is hold that weight upright when you're walking, the more stable the system that does that, the better. So balance is always a good thing to work on. Keep moving. All right. So we know that if, let's say, you have an arthritic part, you are saying your knees become arthritic. We know that sitting there and doing nothing with it, the knee will probably get worse quicker. Whereas if you move it and keep telling your body you want a nice strong joint, you want a nice strong bone density, you want nice strong muscles around it, it will also help keep it lubricated so it will move as efficiently as possible. So keep moving wherever you can. So supports for your compensation. We've got to consider if there is a place that's hurting, what can we do about that? And keeping everything strong and lubricated is the first step of that. Now, one thing that you can do, so if it's a ground up approach, let's say it's your foot that's not dealing as well with the ground as it used to, or that flat foot you've always had, your knee doesn't like coping for anymore, or your hip doesn't like coping for anymore, we can use insoles. So these essentially are a tailored piece of ground for you to walk on that decelerate and accelerate movements so that you are better timed as you roll across the ground. So we're coming back into that synchronization of movements, taking stress off. They're very seldom an arch support. Okay, so normally people think of insoles, they think arch support. Now what we actually want to do is retime that function. All right, so we've got to find the right type of support for the activity you're doing and the problem you have. You might also want to consider things like braces. Now, if you've got a knee injury, to help you, you've got to load it and work it. So if you've got an acute injury, we might want to use knee bracing to help you back to that recovery. But if you've got a long-term problem and the pain is the thing that is stopping you from walking, we're much better to have you walking than not walking. So we might want to think about braces or something like that to aid function. So another thing to consider, the unpopular one, is a stick. So don't think of a stick as something to lean on because it hurts. Think of a stick as a third point of contact so that your brain can better keep that reverse pendulum going. So if the weight is at the end of the spindly bit that's spinning over the top of whatever shape of ground, and you're discoordinated in holding that weight upright, something like a stick can give you more feedback from the ground as to what's happening, and therefore much reduce your likelihood of further injuries. So let's have a look at something that many of us might be compensating for, something we picked up on the way or we were born with, a bunion. All right, so what is a bunion first of all? So bunions we tend to think of as the digit, but in reality it's the migration of this metatarsal away from your foot. So if you look there, the line of this metatarsal is straight, the line of this metatarsal is bent. So for a bunion to form, the long bone, the metatarsal leading up to the big toe joint, has to move away from the foot. That then changes the pull of the muscles that go up the leg. So that pulls the digit around in relation to this joint. So the toe change is actually secondary to the knuckle change in your foot. So the effect of that is it makes your foot floppier, essentially. So it's wider and it's less able to do that re-stiffening part. So in doing that, you've got to find another mechanism of stiffening your foot. All right. So if we're not able to stiffen by rolling back out again, or our foot's remaining rolled in because the bunion is there, then we've got to find another way to affect that. Pardon me. So if you already had an arthritic knee, for example, then so your knee has become arthritic because of a previous injury, say, the extra compensation you're having to do for that bunion will put extra stress on your arthritic knee as it rolls through. You're going to have to work the muscles of your hip and bum more, all right? So they relatively need to be stronger. So if the foot's the thing that rolls us in and the hip's the thing that rolls us out, we use our bum muscles to resist that internal rotation, so that rolling in of the leg as a whole. So if you can't push off very powerfully, you're going to need stronger bum muscles and lower back muscles and sort of hip area. You're going to have reduced balance at push off. So usually when we're pushing off a firm structure, so we're feeling fairly powerful and balanced when we're doing that. So the bunion is going to alter that, and again you're going to have to compensate for that somewhere. So we might use, just go back to this one, you might use exercises to strengthen, I'm just going to leave that, so you might use exercises to strengthen your glute muscles to compensate for the bunion. You might use calf muscle power to give you a bit more push. You might use muscle strengthening for the foot itself. So there are things we can do to compensate with your actual structure. But we also need to account for the fact that the bunion has occurred and we can't really make that go away. So this is where you might use an orthotic insole that's specifically designed to give you a bit of a stiffer push off. So we can account for the shape that the bunion is there by changing the shape of ground around that bunion and give you a bit of a better push off. So hopefully we can use a couple of different mechanisms there to help you deal with the mechanical thing that your body has developed over time or you were born with. So hopefully we've seen from that walking is a complicated but automated system. All right, so we're responding to the shape of the ground and the swing of your body weight over the top in half a second. So it has to be a pretty automated system. You only have so many joints to achieve this. So you've got 2 feet, 2 ankles, 2 knees, 2 hips, 1 pelvis, 1 spine. So if you start to rob yourself of abilities at those different joints, then you're likely to start having to do a compensation which will eventually become uncomfortable or painful. It's the place that cheats that usually gets the pain. So often we'll find in clinic is somebody has a knee pain and they've had a scan and there's nothing particularly wrong with the knee pain. They've done exercises to strengthen the knee, which would be the normal first approach, but that's not enough. It may have helped for a little while, but it keeps getting worse again. Every time you stop doing the exercise, it comes back. So the place you're cheating, in this case the knee, may well not be the actual place of the problem. So this is where a biomechanical assessment comes in to try and work out where these problems are arising from that give you the pain at your cheat. Your body may well complain about having to do that cheating, and aging and injury can further affect that problem. It's worth doing irrespective of anything else that you're looking to do. As we age, move the bits you can, help the bits you can't, right? So where you can improve your hip movement, where you can make your glutes stronger, where you can make your calves and feet stronger, do that. But where you can't, where there's a bunion that we can't change, where there's an arthritic knee that we can't change, or a hip that's becoming arthritic, or you've had an injury to the knee and lost some of the function from your anterior cruciate ligament, something like that, then we can't change that. We're going to have to cheat for it. So use an orthotic or something like that, use an insole. So here's the bit at the end. So we are here to help with all of these types of conditions. So we've got virtual or in-person appointments. So if you want a second opinion about your plantar fasciitis, your bunion or something like that, a virtual appointment's pretty good for that. If you want us to really delve in and work out why you've got this knee pain that won't go away, is it linked to your bunion, is it not? Why does your back keep hurting when you've done all the right stuff with the osteopath and the physio, etc.? So we are here to help with those types of cases. And remember, you can book an appointment online at bxclinic.co.uk, or you can get more information either from our Instagram or Facebook page, and the website again is got loads of information about your specific condition, so well worth a look. So thank you very much for joining me today, and hopefully we can help you in the future.